So picture this. You clear your entire Tuesday.
Oh, the sacred blocked-off Tuesday?
Exactly. You intentionally block your calendar, you've got your coffee, your noise-canceling headphones are on, you sit down to tackle the single most important thing on your plate. You are, like, entirely focused.
Right.
But by 10 o'clock in the morning, the day is just completely destroyed.
Yep, it always is.
You've answered 6 different message threads, you got pulled into some fake emergency video call, you're helping a colleague with a minor software issue, and you're texting your partner back and forth about weekend plans.
And you look at your desk and you realize you're working harder than ever, but the pile is somehow getting bigger.
Exactly. It's so frustrating.
Well, the immediate psychological reaction there is usually just guilt, right? Like you blame yourself for not working fast enough. Or you conclude that the modern workplace is inherently broken.
I mean, it kind of feels impossible sometimes.
It does, but the volume of tasks is rarely the root issue. The actual problem is operating without a definitive sorting mechanism.
Okay, a sorting mechanism.
Yeah, because when you lack a filter, the human brain just defaults to treating every single incoming demand as equally valid. You're operating entirely on reaction.
And in that landscape, the loudest thing wins.
Every single time. The loudest, most persistent, most colorful notification is going to take your attention. So to regain control of your schedule, you have to force every request through a very specific dual filter question.
Which is?
Is this urgent and is this important?
Okay, so if we apply this to real life, let's take a freelancer who also manages a small team. Let's call her Sophia.
Sure.
So Sophia has a massive client deliverable due tomorrow morning. But suddenly, her boss pings her for a routine weekly check-in.
Right, happening at the exact same time.
Always. And her neighbor texts her, practically begging for help moving a heavy couch this weekend. Plus, she's got 3 different project group chats lighting up her phone with varying degrees of panic.
It's just a wall of noise.
Yeah. And if she tries to tackle these sequentially, just as they arrive, her Tuesday is completely lost.
She fails because she's letting the delivery mechanism dictate her priorities. But if she runs that exact same list through the dual filter, the landscape changes entirely.
So how does she break it down?
Well, she looks at the client deliverable. It's both urgent and important, right? It directly impacts her livelihood. That means she does it first, today, without any interruption.
Makes sense.
Then she looks at the weekly check-in with her boss. It's highly important for team alignment, sure, but it completely lacks immediate urgency. Nothing is actually on fire.
So she pushes it.
Exactly. She schedules it for Thursday afternoon, making sure it only gets her attention after the client work is finalized.
The neighbor text is where I feel like it gets tricky for a lot of people.
Oh, 100%.
Because the tone of a text from a friend or a neighbor feels incredibly urgent. It triggers that innate desire to be helpful.
It totally triggers people-pleasing, but you have to look at the second half of the filter. It might be urgent to the neighbor, but it's totally unimportant to Sophia's professional responsibilities. Because it's urgent but unimportant, she delegates it. She asks her partner to handle the coordination with the neighbor.
And then finally, she looks at those 3 noisy group chats. People are arguing over, like, minor aesthetic details.
Which is neither urgent nor important, so she mutes them entirely and makes a conscious decision to just check them once at 5 o'clock.
I think about this like a triage nurse operating in an emergency room, you know?
That's a great way to look at it.
When you walk into an ER, the staff doesn't just treat the person who happens to be screaming the loudest in the waiting area. They systematically evaluate vital signs and treat the person who actually needs the most critical care.
Exactly.
When you stop treating every single demand as equal, you stop letting other people's urgency dictate your agenda. You evaluate the severity and the necessity before you spend your time.
And that triage approach works because it forces a brutal realization about your workload. The pile on your desk only shrinks when you stop carrying things that were never yours to carry in the first place.
Wow, yeah.
A massive percentage of the daily noise is just other people's priorities masquerading as your emergencies. The sorting mechanism strips away that disguise.
Okay, so let's say you've triaged your tasks. You applied the filter, muted the chats, delegated the neighbor. You've essentially bought your time back.
You've cleared the noise.
Right. You sit down to do the one truly important thing, and you immediately hit a brick wall.
Naturally.
You're staring at a massive bug in a piece of code.
Yeah.
Or a video edit that has terrible viewer retention. Or some new project dropped on your desk with 0 direction. Your brain completely freezes.
Yeah, and the natural instinct here is to just start guessing.
Exactly, to throw potential fixes at the wall and pray something sticks.
But guessing is incredibly toxic in these moments because it creates a false sense of momentum.
Hmm.
You feel like you're solving the problem, but you're actually just introducing new, uncontrolled
Into
variables.
a system you don't even fully understand yet.
Precisely. So when you hit that wall, you must resist the urge to immediately solve the problem. Instead, you have to practice decomposition. Taking it apart. Taking it apart. You break the overwhelming monolithic problem down into smaller, observable pieces. You isolate the raw materials, the things that change, the exact sequence of steps, the rules, and the expected breaking point.
I love looking at this through a non-technical lens first.
Yeah.
Like say you spend hours baking a cake, and it comes out of the oven incredibly dense and completely flat.
Just a literal brick.
A total brick.
Right.
If you rely on guessing, you probably assume you're a terrible baker, throw the recipe away, and never try again.
Right.
But if you practice decomposition, you don't guess. You check the inputs first. Was the flour measured correctly by weight? Was the baking powder actually active, or had it been sitting in the pantry for 3 years?
Was the butter at the precise room temperature required to trap air? You check the inputs, and then you move to the process.
Okay.
You analyze whether the batter was overmixed, developing too much gluten. You check if the eggs were incorporated properly. Finally, you evaluate the environment.
Like the oven itself.
Exactly. Is the oven temperature genuinely accurate, or does it run 50 degrees hot? Was the oven door open too early, causing a sudden drop that collapsed the structure?
So you move away from a vague emotional sense of failure to this highly methodical checklist of specific variables.
Yes. And this maps perfectly onto highly technical professional work.
Right, like if you're dealing with a bug in code, you don't just rewrite the whole program.
No, you trace the chain of functions, you identify the exact point where the state changes, you actively separate the logic issues from the data issues.
Or if you're looking at that directionless project, you don't just start assigning random busy work to your team.
Exactly. You list the necessary processes, the roles required, the tasks owned by each role, and the dependencies connecting them all.
It's all about breaking it down.
And the greatest hidden benefit of decomposition is that it gives you language. Saying, the cake sucked, or this code is garbage, is a dead end.
It's just unactionable complaining.
But stating, the baking powder was expired and the butter was cold, that is a precise diagnosis that dictates your exact next step.
Right, in a professional setting, complaining that the marketing system is broken helps literally no one.
But stating this specific service mutates state incorrectly under this exact server load solves the problem immediately. Clear language forces clear thinking.
I feel like this completely shatters the myth of intuition. People look at a senior engineer or a veteran manager who spots a critical flaw in 3 seconds, and they think it's magic.
Oh, they totally assume this person just possesses some innate, unteachable genius.
Right. But the brain isn't performing magic.
No. A junior professional might take 3 days to find a bug because they're trying to hold the entire monolithic problem in their working memory all at once. The cognitive load is simply too high.
So what is the senior person actually doing?
The senior professional appears to use intuition, but neurologically, it's incredibly fast pattern matching. They have decomposed similar problems hundreds of times throughout their career.
So the underlying structure of the failure is already familiar to them.
Exactly. Speed doesn't come from guesswork. Speed is the byproduct of relentlessly breaking things down until the individual pieces are recognizable.
Okay, so we've decomposed code and we've decomposed cakes. But here is where it gets incredibly complicated for a lot of managers.
Okay, lay it on me.
What happens when you break down the process, you look at all the individual pieces, and the broken piece of the puzzle appears to be a human being.
Ah, yes.
Let me give you an example. I was reading a case study about a manager, let's call him Marcus. He oversees an operations team. And he was ready to fire his coordinator, Diane.
Why? What was she doing?
Her reports were constantly full of mathematical errors. He brought her into his office, he warned her 3 separate times, but the errors persisted. The most logical conclusion for Marcus is that Diane is completely incompetent.
It is the most logical conclusion, but it's also the trap of the fundamental attribution error.
Which is what exactly?
As human beings, we're psychologically wired to blame a person's character or capability long before we examine their environment. It's much easier to fire Diane than it is to audit a complex departmental workflow.
Right.
But behavior at work never happens in a vacuum. It's the product of expectations, tools, information sharing, and feedback loops. A fundamentally broken process will reliably produce broken results, regardless of who is sitting in the seat.
But wait, like, At what point do we actually hold the person accountable? If we constantly blame the system, aren't we just risking making endless excuses for bad performance?
That's a fair pushback.
Because at a certain point, a professional just has to do their job correctly.
You absolutely must hold people accountable, but sequence is everything. You only earn the right to evaluate the person after you have validated the process.
Oh, I see.
If you evaluate the person first, you're operating entirely on assumptions. Before Marcus makes any decision about Diane's employment, he has to trace the output backward. He needs to investigate the specific conditions of her daily work.
Like, does she actually have a clear standard for what a correct report looks like?
Exactly. Is she working off assumptions because her onboarding is cut short? Is she given enough time in the workflow to review her own work, or does the deadline structure force her to rush every single Friday?
So Marcus takes a step back and audits the workflow. He traces the data backward and discovers a known, undocumented inconsistency in the external data source itself.
There it is.
Diane wasn't making math errors at all. She was taking the data the system provided, processing it exactly as she was instructed to, and submitting it. She was submitting exactly what the system gave her.
The errors were entirely baked into the process before the file ever reached her desk.
Exactly.
And think about it, if Marcus fires Diane, he fixes absolutely nothing. The next person he hires will sit in that exact same seat, use that exact same flawed data source, and produce the exact same errors 3 weeks later.
That's wild.
A pattern of bad output inside an ignored process is evidence of a broken system, not evidence of human incompetence. You must trace the work to its absolute origin. You follow it through every single handoff, and you find exactly where the clarity breaks down.
Because most performance problems have a highly visible seam in that chain.
Yes, and only when you prove the chain is completely solid can you address the individual's capability.
Okay, so you've triaged your tasks, you've decomposed the technical problems, you've audited the broken management systems, and stopped blaming your team for process failures. You've completely cleared your plate.
You finally have the quiet time to do deep, creative work.
Yes. You sit down at your desk to generate a brilliant new idea.
And your brain completely freezes.
The page just remains blank. And the harder you try to squeeze an idea out of your brain, the more elusive it becomes.
Because the harder you squeeze, the more you engage the brain's executive function, which actually stifles the default mode network where creative connections are made.
So you can't force it.
No. Ideas do not show up on demand. You cannot force them through sheer willpower, and sitting around waiting for a magical strike of inspiration is entirely useless.
So what do?
Well, while you can't force an idea to appear, you can intentionally engineer the specific environment where ideas are highly likely to surface. There are 3 specific tactics you can deploy to unstick your brain.
What's the first one?
The first is engaged conversation.
Okay, but this doesn't mean talking to a passive wall or a colleague who just nods politely while you ramble.
Exactly. You have to speak with someone who actively pushes back, asks why, and spots the logical gaps you skipped over. The act of explaining your half-baked thought to another human being forces you to externalize it.
And the gaps you couldn't see when the idea was just bouncing around inside your own head become glaringly obvious the second someone asks a fundamental question you realize you can't answer.
Externalizing it forces your brain to arrange abstract thoughts into linear language.
Right. And what's the second tactic?
It relies on external input, specifically using the podcast filter.
The podcast filter.
Yeah, you find a show featuring a guest you've never heard of, but hosted by someone you deeply trust. The trusted host acts as your quality filter. You aren't blindly gambling on a random recommendation.
Right. But you're also not just trying to memorize the guest's entire biography. You're hunting for just one new framing or one single angle that maps perfectly onto the problem you're currently trying to solve.
Exactly. And the third tactic is mining your own past output.
Oh, I love this one. Going back through old blog posts, previous project notes, earlier notebook sketches.
When you look at work you produced months or years ago, your brain's pattern recognition kicks in incredibly fast. You start finding dropped threads.
You see those half-formed ideas that you abandoned because you simply didn't have the skills to execute them at the time.
And you suddenly notice connections between 2 entirely different things you made 6 months apart. What makes these 3 tactics work neurologically is that they all introduce a pattern interrupt.
Because when you're stuck, your brain is just trapped running down the exact same familiar neural pathways over and over again.
Yes. You're using another brain, a new voice from an unknown guest, or a past version of yourself. You're intentionally colliding your current, stuck mindset with an outside force to break the deadlock and force a new pathway to form.
That collision is the spark. But I know you also advocate for looking inward to build the container for that spark.
The outside spark requires the right personal context to catch fire. You must trace back your own historical moments of effortless flow. Think about the specific times in your life when ideas poured out of you easily.
Like, where were you physically? What were you doing?
Exactly. Were you walking in the woods? Were you sitting in a loud, crowded coffee shop? Or were you sitting in absolute pitch black silence? The conditions that trigger flow are highly unique to your individual brain.
So replicating those deeply personal contexts is your true starting point for building a reliable idea generation environment.
You've got it.
Okay, so let's say the environment works. The outside spark hits, the idea flows effortlessly, you build the project, and you finally present it to a room of 30 people.
A huge moment.
You finish your presentation. Most of the people in the room nod enthusiastically. Several colleagues come up to you afterward and praise the specific mechanics of what you build. It's an undeniable success. But later that afternoon, you see that 2 people have completely ripped the presentation apart in a company group chat.
Ah, of course.
They hate the core concept, they mock the execution, and they make sure everyone in the department sees their critique.
The psychological reality of this moment is intense, and it's rooted entirely in evolutionary biology. This is the negativity bias at work.
Because your brain is wired to ignore the 28 people smiling at you, since smiles are safe.
Exactly. Your brain locks entirely onto the 2 people attacking you because historically, negative signals represented a threat to survival. The immediate instinct is to panic, reply defensively to the chat, and over-clarify your position.
And then immediately begin redoing the entire presentation to address their specific complaints.
Which is where you must draw a hard, conscious line between your feelings and your behavior.
Because you will feel terrible. There is no life hack to turn off human emotion. Your heart rate will increase, you'll feel defensive, you'll feel rattled.
The feeling is entirely involuntary. You cannot stop the feeling. But behavior is a choice. You do not have to let the evolutionary alarm bell dictate your next physical action.
Right.
Before you touch a single slide in that presentation, you have to step back and actually check the math.
You had 30 people in that room. 2 people complained. 2 out of 30 is a statistical anomaly. It's not a trend.
No, it's absolutely not a valid signal that the work is inherently flawed.
Yeah.
You also have to evaluate the source of the critique. Are these 2 people the chronic complainers of your office?
Oh, we all know those people. Do they find something deeply wrong with literally everything every single day, regardless of the topic?
If they are chronic complainers, their feedback is noise, not data. But the real danger lies in how you respond. Think about the ripple effect of giving into the negativity bias.
What does that look like?
If you rebuild the whole presentation just to appease those 2 specific critics, you're playing a completely losing game. You're optimizing your output for the most cynical people in the room.
And they'll probably just find something entirely new to hate in the second version anyway.
Exactly.
And the hidden cost is so much worse. You've just sourced the 28 people who actually loved and understood the original bold version to sit through a diluted, second-guess, compromised version of the work.
You stripped out the edge to make it safe.
We end up taxing the many to soothe our own feelings about the few.
Which is why reacting to the statistical anomaly hands total control of your work over to the wrong people. The negativity bias only wins if it fundamentally alters your behavior.
That makes so much sense.
True professional maturity is feeling the intense sting of the critique, acknowledging that the 2 critics represent a statistical anomaly, and actively choosing to move forward without changing a single word of your presentation. You decouple the emotional reaction from the strategic execution.
When you pull all of these pieces together, the underlying continuous thread becomes incredibly clear. This entire philosophy is about reclaiming control from the chaos around us.
That's really it.
It's about taking the power back from the overwhelming volume of our daily tasks by ruthlessly sorting the urgent from the important, instead of letting everyone else dictate our day.
And reclaiming control from the sheer complexity of a broken system by methodically decomposing the parts instead of guessing blindly.
It's about stripping away the anxiety of a blank page by engineering an environment that forces ideas to surface. And it's about protecting your best work from the loud voices of a few cynical critics by refusing to let statistical anomalies dictate your behavior.
So look at your life right now. Look at the specific recurring friction points in your day. Look at the failures that you are currently blaming on a lack of personal talent, a lack of divine created inspiration, or the poor attitude of a coworker.
Yeah.
What if that failure is actually just a hidden, broken process waiting to be taken apart? The moment you stop guessing, stop reacting to the loudest noise, and start methodically dismantling the machine in front of you, the power is entirely back in your hands.